Is His Excellency Mr. Ivan Šimonović in the room now?
Hello, I just joined.
Hi, Ambassador. It is so nice to see you over here, and welcome to our discussion on diplomacy, crime prevention, and prevention of atrocities in the 21st century. Such a pleasure to host you on behalf of the Global Policy, Diplomacy and Sustainability Fellowship. My name is Arpa Chaturvedi. I'm the director of the fellowship, and I've been in touch with the team. Before I invite you for your keynote address, I would just introduce you in detail to all of the people who've joined us today. Even though a majority of our fellows and a majority of the people in our think tank network have already read through your profile and they've already researched your work, but as convention dictates, if you may allow, I might just read out a brief introduction for yourself, Ambassador.
Great, thank you very much. You know, I would like to have a session as interactive as possible.
Absolutely.
So I would not like to wait for end of presentation for questions and comments. I would encourage them immediately, and I would even provoke them. So the colleagues I will have a discussion with, are they timid or they like to ask questions and to take the floor?
Most of the time they like to ask questions and take the floor.
Great, then I'll be able to provoke them. That's great. That's great.
Amazing. Okay, so let me first get to your introduction, Ambassador. So Ambassador Ivan Šimonović started his Ambassador Ivan Šimonović is the ambassador and permanent representative of Croatia to the United Nations. He started his second mandate, in fact, as the ambassador and permanent representative of the Republic of Croatia to the UN in New York in 2019. At the United Nations, he served as the UN Secretary General and Special Advisor of the UN Secretary General on the responsibility to protect from 2016 to 2018, and as the UN Secretary General for Human Rights from 2010 to 2016. He also served Croatia in different capacities, including as the Minister of Justice, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, permanent representative to the United Nations in New York earlier. In 2002, he served as the President of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. Academically, he has worked as a professor at the Faculty of Law, University of Zagreb, a senior visiting scholar and fellow at the Columbia University, New York, and visiting professor at Leeds University, UK, and Penn University, US, as well as honorary professor at the University of Queensland, Australia. In an expert capacity, Šimonović has been a member of the Council of Europe's Commission on Democracy through Law, the Venice Commission, and the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance, as well as he served as the agent of the Republic of Croatia before the International Court of Justice. Ambassador Šimonović obtained his law degree, bachelor's and master's both, and a PhD from the Faculty of Law, University of Zagreb. He's fluent in Croatian, that's his native language, English, and has a good knowledge of German as well as Italian. He's married with 2 children. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for joining us. And we are so fascinated by your diverse experience in diplomacy, in international organizations, as well as in academia. So I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions for you today.
Thank you, dear colleagues. I'm looking forward to our exchange today. It is always a pleasure to discuss with young, clever, motivated people. And I am really looking forward to a two-way discussion, which means please do not wait for the end of my presentation to have reactions such as questions, comments. In fact, I will try to provoke them.
Yeah.
Let me start with explaining the title of our discussion today. I believe that human rights and respect for human rights and atrocity crimes prevention are very closely related. Respect for human rights, especially for some particular human rights, such as non-discrimination, especially non-discrimination of identity-based groups, is crucial to make societies resilient and to decrease the likelihood of atrocity crimes. We call that structural prevention, something what you can do to decrease the likelihood of atrocity crimes being committed. But let me ask you, I'm using some terms that are very specific. What would you say, what are atrocity crimes that I'm referring to? Anyone having an idea of particular atrocity crimes?
Anyone, you can raise your hands and you can unmute yourself, or if you find it hard to unmute yourself, we'll unmute you over there. So you could probably raise your hands.
Anyone daring to try with atrocity crimes?
Parikshit?
No, I'm still thinking. Nice to meet you, sir. Your Excellency. Nice to meet you. I'm Pari, and yeah, I will have to think on this a bit.
I'm thinking of something that's happening in Afghanistan, not too far away from us, and recently where we have a number of atrocities committed over a vast section of the population. I think Yuhina and Yogita over there, they have something to say as well. So if we can unmute Yuhina and Yogita. Yeah. Rashi, we might need your help in unmuting Yuhina and Yogita. There you
go. Hello, Arpit, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
Hello, good evening, sir. My name is Yuhina. I'm a lawyer by profession, so I have little understanding the term, what atrocities basically means. In my understanding, I believe it's an act which the human society would deem to be very outrageously cruel and vile, which goes against, which is committed when the act doesn't even require any kind of action to be taken. It's often associated with something which is excessive in nature and senseless at times, and it involves extreme violence.
Thank you very much. The other colleague?
And Yogita?
Good evening, sir. It's my honor to speak to you. And atrocity, in my words, would mean brutality and physical violence against others.
Thank you both, and you're both right. The outcome document of the World Conference in 2005 mentioned 4 categories of atrocity crimes: genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing. And when I'm referring to atrocity crimes, I'm referring to all crimes that fall under those 4 categories. So after explaining that, would any one of you have some ideas about identity-based groups? I said that it's particularly dangerous when in societies there is structural, meaning systematic discrimination against certain groups in society, which I call identity-based groups. Any ideas on that?
Mm-hmm. Anybody? Yuhina? Okay, again, we have Yuhina and Yogita. All right. Yogita, do you...
Okay, Yogita can go first. Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Yogita. I'm so sorry.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I was saying, in my mind, there is one group named Uyghurs in China. I think China is literally genociding the Uyghurs.
So, Yogita, what do you think are identity-based groups? Like, how would you define identity-based groups?
Identity-based groups are those which have their particular ethnicity, I think. So I'm relating them to the ethnicity.
So I think that both of you were having excellent answers. Yes, identity-based groups are groups that are having same identity. It could be religious identity, it can be ethnic identity, and it's particularly dangerous if there is systematic discrimination of people because of their religion, because their ethnicity, or because some other background that they share. And of course, Uyghurs are a good example of a group that is both identity-based in sense of their ethnicity as well as religion.
Yeah.
Now,
Plaza, I think Yohina has something to add over there, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Yes, Yohina.
I believe sir covered my points, but what I consider what identity-based group is like when you have certain overlap, not between your religious and ethnic community, but also when your economic stature in the society also overlaps with that identity. So usually we see identity-based groups violence are majority of those groups fall in a very low forms of economic stature. So how I believe someone did just mention the Uyghurs in China, and then you have Rohingyas. So what we see is a common pattern is they do fall under some specific social economic state of the society as well.
And of course, we can speak about some other identity-based discrimination, for example, racial discrimination as well. Now, we have stated now that human rights and respect for human rights is very important in preventing likelihood or in preventing certain rise of risk of atrocity crimes. But there is also another link between human rights and atrocity crimes. Violations of human rights are early warning signs of the increase of likelihood of occurring of atrocity crimes. It is an indicator that the risk is increasing, and especially if we have information that certain human rights that we have already mentioned, that they are being violated, that there is a rise in certain societies at certain moment of hate speech against some identity-based groups, or that there are some laws passed that systematically discriminate certain identity-based groups. Can you think of some examples of such human rights violations in the past that were indicators of the rising threat of atrocity crimes? So practical examples like we heard a little while ago, like, for example, Uyghurs in China, or if you can remember perhaps the case of genocide of Tutsis in Rwanda, or some laws being passed discriminating Tamils, or some laws passed discriminating Rohingyas, and so on. Can anybody intervene on that issue?
Yeah. Said, did you have something to say that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Ewan, or Professor Ewan, I beg your pardon. I'm kind of very much beset by the treatment of the Rohingyas and the reaction of the United Nations towards the plight of the Rohingya people and the way things has been stepped down. I would want if you could shed a little bit light about the inhumane treatment, the cultural reintegrations, where we have to respect the diversity of the people, and the basic human rights of the Rohingya people. Why has the United Nations not upheld the basic human rights of Rohingya people? And why is it that the minority or the superiority, or let me say, the power complex between China and the United Nations is hindering the effort of the United Nations in helping people in the Rohingyas?
Okay. Thank you, Shahid. On Rohingyas, we have a very good example that we were seeing those early warning signs of their human rights violation and their discrimination. The laws have been passed depriving them of their citizenship. The laws have been passed that were discriminatory against them. And those were all early warning signs that they are going to be targeted. Now, why has nothing been done? There were some attempts. For example, I was, when those discriminatory laws against them were passed, when they were deprived of citizenship and so on, I was Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights. And I was publicly giving statements on danger of such a political course. We in the United Nations have established even a specific group of senior leaders dealing with Myanmar and increased risk against Rohingyas. However, I can tell you that even among UN officials, there was no unanimity in deciding how to react. Human rights part was more in favor of UN being loud, speaking up, while some others dealing with developmental issues or developmental and political issues were saying, listen, it is a chance that country may be democratizing, we should not be scolding them, it'll be all right, it'll be better, and so on. In the Security Council, it was very difficult, and still is, to raise that issue because of different interests of superpowers. I can tell you that even people who are now, or not people, even representatives of countries that are now outspoken concerning the plight of Rohingyas, such as United States, such as EU countries, even they were to a certain way reluctant at early stages to be active on the issue, because they thought that they may, by too strong reaction, delegitimize San Suu Kyi, and that would be bad for a young democracy. On the other hand, there were some other countries that were refusing to have it on the agenda of the Security Council at all, even when things started to deteriorate. Then, when things went very bad for Rohingyas, at the time I was in a new capacity, special advisor on responsibility to protect, and together with special advisor on prevention of genocide, we had a very strong statement on the situation of Rohingyas, saying that available information indicates that atrocity crimes are being committed against Rohingyas, and that there is a need for urgent action to stop it, and that responsibility to protect is responsibility of all Security Council members as well as other member states. There was, at the end, Myanmar was discussed at the Security Council, but any substantive resolution could not really be passed. Any strong resolution could not be passed. Why? In the Security Council, to get an issue on the agenda of the Security Council, you need 9 votes. And on procedural issues, the permanent 5 members of the Security Council do not have a veto power. So if you have, out of 15, 9 member states wishing to have something on the Security Council, it comes on the agenda of the Security Council. It is being discussed. But to pass the resolution, you need, again, 9 votes, but any of 5 Security Council member states can block this resolution. And in Myanmar, it was China, supported by Russian Federation, that was preventing any strong resolution condemning treatment of Rohingyas or passing any resolution under Chapter 7. Why I'm referring to Chapter 7 resolutions? Because only Chapter 7 resolutions of the Security Council have a legal power. Resolutions of General Assembly have political leverage, but they are not legally binding. Only resolutions of the Security Council passed under Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is when there is a threat to peace and security, have legally binding powers, and there could be force used in order to ensure compliance with them. However, as I mentioned, for those resolutions to be passed, you have to have unanimity of the Security Council P5, permanent 5 member states. Now, I mentioned to you something now on structural prevention. Let's come to operational prevention. When there are clear signs that situation in certain countries is deteriorating, that's time when action needs to be done. And if such action is not taken, the likelihood of discrimination leading to atrocity crimes is increasing. This is a time when I argue that atrocity crimes diplomacy has to be implemented. Now, I'm not talking about Security Council. I'll primarily be referring to actions of UN diplomats that can help divert atrocity crimes. As you heard from Arpit, I was involved during my career in many situations involving prevention of atrocity crimes. During conflict in former Yugoslavia, I was actively participating in search for humanitarian and human rights centered measures that were aimed at preventing atrocity crimes. I was also plenipotentiary of Croatia in the discussions of implementation of international humanitarian law in case of atrocities in former Yugoslavia. And later, as Arpit mentioned, I was Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights and for responsibility to protect, responsibility to protect basically is responsibility to protect from the atrocity crimes. So my arguments concerning atrocity crimes prevention diplomacy are based on my experiences.
Right.
Now, let me immediately go into the essence of what I call atrocity crimes prevention diplomacy. The essence is that you need to convince people of influence in situations where there is a threat of atrocity crimes to refrain from them. So you need to timely address people of influence. So who would be those people of influence? Those would be political and military leaders, not only state leaders. It could be leaders of non-state actors, of the ones who may be involved in atrocity crimes. But now we are getting into following problem. What if people of influence are people who are notorious human rights violators? What if they have already, or their subordinates have already been involved in atrocity crimes? Would you still engage with them? If you would engage, how would you engage them? How would you prevent that engagement with them brings them certain recognition which they do not deserve and you do not want to grant? So I would like to hear your opinions. Would you engage with them or not? Or we can use practical example. Somebody already mentioned today Talibans. Would you talk to Talibans, being a UN official involved in atrocity crimes prevention? If you would, when would you do it? How would you prepare for such a mission? Whose support could increase your leverage? So what are your views? Are there more risks to talk to them, or should you talk to them to help in atrocity crimes prevention?
Thank you very much. I think I would like to go first. I think there are lesser risk when you do talk to them, because communication is key towards understanding all the actors or necessary actors towards addressing a particular occasion. And you talking to them will allow you to understand some of the background ideologies, the cultural influence, what they want to do and what they want to achieve. Take, for instance, the issue that is currently happening in Afghanistan. They've taken over the government. What is their mission? Are they promoting religious rights or just their own cultural ideology? And who are their targets? Is it that they only want to stay in Afghanistan and take control of the country, or they want to entrench to other countries nearby that is going to affect a lot of diplomatic core outside the realm or within the realm? So I think talking to them, the state actors and the non-state actors, is very, very important towards analyzing the background issues to be solved and towards bringing about all parties. It might just be a politician that is most relevant could be the deciding factors towards meeting or negotiating or having very strong core bilateral relation between the countries. So I think talking to them will give more leverage, economically, religiously, understanding them as well, and also knowing much of the ideology and with which one can actually balance the pros and the cons as well. That's my take on that.
I think my take on that, Ambassador, would be that we'll have to figure out a way to speak with them, but at the same time not be seen as legitimizing them. So maybe giving out some clear signals that shows that, you know, we are talking, but that doesn't mean that we are endorsing.
Yeah, you're both completely right. That's how we were doing that. It is now we are having increase of risks, but we had an issue with Taliban for many years. And I can now reveal you what we were doing as the United Nations. In fact, just as you, Arpit, said, avoiding giving them legitimacy and still talking to them, we have chosen the following path. The UN officials who were dealing with political side, such as, for example, UN Undersecretary for Political Affairs, never talked to them. Head of UNAMA mission in Afghanistan never talked to them. However, it was human rights part of UNAMA that was talking to Taliban. And even myself, as Assistant Secretary General, had a discrete meeting with Political Commission of Taliban in Qatar. So I did talk to them even before they have succeeded in taking control. How and what we were discussing. UNAMA, United Nations mission in Afghanistan, was together with Human Rights Commission, National Human Rights Commission of Afghanistan, led by Sima Samar. We were preparing yearly reports on civilian casualties in Afghanistan. That was a uniquely powerful instrument because we were not only identifying all civilian victims, we were also establishing their cause of death and attributing responsibility for their deaths. So I was talking on those findings, and I was yearly coming to Afghanistan. I was talking to General Petraeus as well, because there were some victims of NATO attacks. And as a result of that pressure, NATO did develop protocols on use of air power and so on, which helped to decrease the number of civilian casualties. But we also talked to Taliban. And before publicly releasing report, they had an opportunity to complain, to say you attributed those killings to us and it was not us, it was ISIL, or it was civilian strife and so on. So you do enter into some sort of dialogue. And once you got involved in that dialogue, during the breaks, when we have meal or something, there is an opportunity to discuss other issues. So I noticed at the time that, for example, daughters of members of political commission in Taliban were all being educated in Doha, in Qatar. They were going to universities and so on. So I asked them, well, you know, it's nice that you do it for your daughters, but if you are in power, would you do it differently now? And they said, yes, we would. We want to obey Sharia. However, we want girls to be educated, to have access also to university education, and they also have a right to work. And what you are seeing now is still that it continues, that political commission of Taliban is in favor of those changes, while it seems that people who were in the land related to military commission were giving some different statements. So I just wanted to mention that there are some good reasons why to involve with everyone. I also involved, for example, with the leaders of secessionists in the Eastern Ukraine.
Right.
And I can also tell you something about the division of labor. Under Secretary General for Political Affairs, he was going to Ukraine and talk to the president. He was going to Moscow and talk to the president, trying to deal with political side. Right. While I was focused on humanitarian and human rights centered confidence building measures. And for that, you need to talk to actors on the ground. I was regularly going to Ukraine, I established human rights monitoring mission in Ukraine, who was during midst of conflict issuing monthly report on human rights violations in Ukraine. And we were addressing all human rights violations, not only human rights violations of secessionist authorities, but we were also addressing issues of some secessionist detainees being in an unlawful detention at not disclosed locations, some of them even suffering torture. And we were having all that in our reports, and it enabled us to talk to both sides from human rights and humanitarian perspective. It was not being supportive of secessionists, and UN was quite clear that we respect integrity of Ukraine. However, if you deal with human rights side, now a question for you related to this. When you as high-level human rights and atrocity crimes prevention officer, when you talk to people, are you neutral?
Oh, okay, it's a very, very good question.
I see some signs, but not yet words.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not muted. So I will bring from my perspective. I used to work as a consultant in Uganda, in Palorina, in humanitarian contests. I would say no. If you're talking to partners, you are not neutral because you have a specific idea that you want to mainstream and you want to come out of it. Maybe you want to solve the issue. So you are part and parcel of the problem until the problem is resolved. So when you do come in to listen to different parties, you're trying as much as possible to gather information and comply with a particular principle. Because, for instance, let's say I'm working for the United Nations. I'm representing the United Nations, the ideology of the United Nations. So I'm coming down to meet a party on board. And I want them to comply with this status quo of what is happening in order to resolve the issue that's around the conflict. So I get to understand what is happening, and I try to promote the idea of equity. So I'm not really neutral because I'm coming with a particular ideology, I'm coming with a particular concept of how things should run. But if I'm trying to solve the problem as well, I need to ensure that the local knowledge and what I'm bringing actually balance off and the conflict is reduced. So I think anybody coming in also have their own ideas and they're not completely neutral.
Thank you, Shahid. Now, this is why I insist that human rights and atrocity crimes prevention diplomacy are different, that they are specific branch of diplomatic activities. When diplomats approach situation, they try to be neutral, respect each of the sides, treat them on an equal basis, and so on. When I, as a person dealing with human rights violations and atrocity crimes prevention, when I get into the picture, I'm never neutral. I'm always siding with victims, and I'm always against the abusers or the ones who are committing violations and atrocity crimes. I'm impartial because I don't care which is the ethnicity or political affiliation of perpetrators or victims. So I'm impartial, but I'm not neutral. I'm always on the victim's side. So that's what I'm emphasizing, that we in the 21st century, we need to not invent human rights and atrocity crimes prevention diplomacy. It already has some roots, some practical experiences. However, it is not systematically implemented. It should be implemented more often and more systematic that it is at the moment. But let's again turn to our example of your potential mission to Afghanistan. When do you think would be a right moment after Taliban have overtaken Afghanistan? When is the right moment for you to travel to Afghanistan, and how would you prepare your mission? Who in Afghanistan would you like to talk? In preparing your mission, who would like, what would you like to do, and who would you like to talk to, and what would you do during and at the end of the mission? So let me hear you. Any ideas are good.
Sarah, I know you have a question, but do you also have ideas on that? Let us unmute Sarah. Yeah.
Hi, nice to meet you and everybody.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, repeat. So I come from an inventor's background and an inventor's perspective when I'm thinking about conversations with the Taliban, specifically in regard to the fact that their government is now being rebuilt due to the evacuation of their current president, which means that they're at a really sensitive place of growth. And that's the position I prefer to take with it, because I believe that there's now the opportunity for technologies and new ideas to really come into play as they're taking their first steps in establishing how they're going to run things, right? And for me, you know, I would start with an infrastructure the same way that most civilizations had started. So one of the things that me and our Pete are working on is a postal system that helps everyone in the world have an address and a bank account. That's, you know, as scary as it initially is, it's actually, you know, something that I would, you know, introduce to them as saying, well, you know, before you guys can really start to run a government, you need to be able to keep track of everyone, right? Have a responsibility and a communication, and help them to establish that so that they can have that flow of understanding between the people and themselves. And I think, you know, at least laying the foundation for that, kind of, I don't want to say cements democracy, because anybody can do whatever they want, right? They can turn on a dime, Lord willing, they don't. But I think it really opens the door for them to have relationships, you know, with the people directly. And I think that's really powerful in the early shaping of the new country, right? And making sure everyone's equally accessible and able to communicate. So yeah, I would go in from a technology perspective and really encourage that relationship and how to have those relationships and accountability for everyone.
I would probably, you know, take a slightly different approach and not enter over there right now until they are a little stabilized. And I would probably go in when they are a little more stable as a government, and then start talking to the prime minister, the president over there, and you know, all of the relevant officials first. Wherein I would also probably involve some civil society groups, some non-governmental groups into the discussion. But that's my very rough initial idea. I know Saeed has something to say there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alpate. I think whenever there's a new government, I think one first thing is to be hands-on with them. There's an embassy of a particular country in any country, like in Afghanistan, of course, there's an embassy there. So the embassy will enter talk with the government. You're a new government. What do you expect from us? How could we be of help to your government? And in turn, we could, at every stages, be able to understand their ideology, because if you allow them to grow, some of the things they initially explain to the world, we're going to allow girls education, we're going to do this, might be so difficult. But at the start, you are there, you're understanding the whole situation, the dynamics of the situation, and you're trying to provide your influence, because if you're not part of them, definitely you're out of their way. So through that, we can understand them. You can also be sponsoring the civil society organizations. You can be understanding the political leaders from will I say, the preacher's perspective, the military perspective, the political figure perspective of things. And through then, we can be able to show our concern and will be heard. Not if the country is a little bit stable. I think they would have grown a lot of effort from other parties who is going to providing them with ammunition, maybe Qatar, let's say, maybe Oman. So other countries too will be trying to help them so that it can have some level of influence. If US is not doing that, China will definitely be doing that. Russia will be definitely be doing that because they have other interests. So if you start at the same time with almost all of them, your interest will be had. You will gain their attention. At one point, some level of trust would have been gained because you will be helping them in building their democracy or whatsoever, their governments, and as well, you'll be having some things to be able to manage and control. That's my take.
So thank you very much, colleagues. Fascinating discussion. Let me start with Arpit. At the moment, the problem with going immediately to Afghanistan would be a lack of clarity of interlocutors. Because it's all fluid. You do not know who is going to be new emir, who is going to be heading government, who will be sitting in the parliament. Will there be a representative body such as Loya Jirga as so far or not? If I was planning mission, I would probably wait to have a little bit more clarity, and we'll have that in no more than about a week, I think. And what is essential, I think, is to go immediately when you have clarity who are the ones who will be calling the shots in the country. Why immediately? Because you want to talk to them before they make wrong moves. Especially if you think that a warning shot not to involve in retaliation can help to avoid some atrocities being committed. And I can tell you again from my experience, I was sent by Ban Ki-moon to be in Côte d'Ivoire to help his special representative dealing with the crisis situation there when there was outbreak of hostilities between President Gbagbo and pro-elected President Ouattara forces. Gbagbo was refusing to accept results of the election, and President Ouattara, who was legally elected as a new president, could not take over. And UN had a mandate to verify elections. We verified elections, and we were protecting President-elect Ouattara in our compound, and our troops were protecting him from Gbagbo's troops, which were surrounding our compound and golf hotel where we were protecting Ouattara. And President Gbagbo's troops were already involved in a number of atrocity crimes against pro-Ouattara supporters, including civilians. And I was in Abidjan when the supporters for President-elect Ouattara, who were mostly in the northern parts of the country, were from north coming towards Abidjan. And near a town named Duekwe, for the first time, it was pro-Ouattara forces, Ouattara's troops, who were involved in massive atrocity crimes. So I was able to visit Wekwe, to talk to families of victims, to some survivors, to Moroccan battalion of the United Nations, which were selecting bodies of slaughtered civilians. So I had first-hand knowledge, I had photographs, I had everything. And I returned to Abidjan and went to talk to Ouattara. And I just wanted to give him a warning shot. And I thought it's going to be short and a pleasant discussion with President-elect. And the only document, part of photographs and so on, that I was carrying with me was the statute of International Criminal Court. And it turned into a very helpful hour-and-a-half discussion. I explained to him what his forces have committed. And then I explained to him what ICC statute, International Criminal Court statute, says about command responsibility of political and military leaders. They are not only responsible for giving orders to commit atrocity crimes, but also for not preventing them and not punishing them when they occur. So Ouattara was extremely interested in what I saw in Dwekwe, but also how, for example, criminal tribunal for former Yugoslavia or for Rwanda were interpreting a command responsibility and so on. Right. And the effect was that soon after our meeting, Ouattara appeared on the television and he announced that all perpetrators of crimes, whether belonging to his own side or the other side, will be prosecuted, that every crime is a crime and will be punished. And I can't tell you how many lives that saved. It didn't save all lives. Still some pro-Ouattara forces have committed some crimes, but I firmly believe far less than they otherwise would. And in some other cases, I also have found that such a direct approach, it does work.
Question there,
for example, during... Please.
So why do you think that he cared about... Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, Apri.
Okay, I think there's a bit of a lag. So my question is that why do you think that he cared about what ICJ has talked about in its statutes? What do you think would have gone on his mind, and what sort of an incentive calculation he would have done so as to be able to be brought on to your side and to have made that statement on television?
He realized that if he does not have a clear record that he was trying to prevent atrocity crimes being committed by his own forces, he could be held accountable. And that could involve his responsibility and prosecution by ICC. And in fact, this is something that really does influence people. I can tell you a number of other practical examples when that worked. Let's stay within Côte d'Ivoire.
Sure.
Before that, when it was only President Gbagbo forces that were involved in atrocity crimes, we have sent individual letters to 2 military leaders and to 2 political leaders of the Gbagbo's establishment, stating, based on information we are receiving, the forces under your influence or command have been involved in grave breaches of human rights and committed some atrocity crimes under the concept of command responsibility under international humanitarian and criminal law. You, if that is proved before the Court of Justice, you could be held accountable for these crimes.
Right.
Literally all 4 people who got such a letter have reacted to such a letter, have contacted Office of Human Rights, saying it's not true, our forces are not doing that, or I'm doing everything I can to prevent atrocity crimes, however it may happen, but we will investigate it, and so on. So what's the logic if you address top political and military leaders raising those issues? Usually, most political and military leaders will try to protect themselves. They will issue orders, for example, to their high generals not to commit crimes, that every crime should be prevented, or if it occurs, that there should be a reaction, investigations against the ones who perpetrated them. Now,
so Ambassador, just one clarification question over there again. That's just not lip service. That's some serious orders that they'd give to their generals.
It may or may not be lip service. It may be just lip service. I will have it in my file that I issued this order and I'm off the hook.
Yeah.
I did my best, and I don't mind whether this happens in reality or not. I'm protected. For some, it will be lip service, for some not. But even if it's a lip service, listen what happens. Try to imagine a situation of a general who gets such an order and knows it's a lip service. So he thinks, you see, my boss is off the hook, so my head is now on plate. So, continuing the lip service, you will give an order to your subordinates. You have to refrain and so on. Now I'm off the hook. And then those people at the lower level say, oh, so general is off the hook. So he wants me to be prosecuted. Therefore, even if people are not genuinely committed, it does have certain effect. Is that effect perfect? Far from being perfect, but it spares us from a lot of atrocity crimes if such an action is taken at the early stage. Why at the early stage? The action such as this one is most effective if people who are approached have not yet the point of no return. If they reach the point of no return, if they were involved in too many crimes up to then it doesn't work, because they know that whatever they do from now on, they would still be prosecuted for what they have done. But if they so far have not been involved into too much, they have not been involved too much in atrocity crimes, it has a very strong effect. I can tell you, for example, in another case of South Sudan, I have been talking to both President Kiir and Riek Machar, as well as 4 top generals on both sides. And Riek Machar and Salva Kiir, now, you forget about their reputation. They both listened to me very carefully about the command responsibility, their potential responsibility. They were interested in the topic and they wanted to receive me. Out of their 4 generals, with some of them I couldn't speak in person because they were unreachable, fighting somewhere far away, although I was trying to go to the field also as much as I could. 3 out of them were involved in a serious discussion trying to explain me what they are doing to prevent atrocity crimes and so on. And I was able to advise them to have orders issued and that they have in their files clear evidence of attempts to prevent atrocity crimes. One was only shouting on me, insulting me, and there was no effect. But it was 1 out of 4. And there always will be people who are completely ruthless or who are completely reckless. I, together with Secretary General, have talked on atrocity crimes prevention to a president who was completely, you couldn't deal with that guy because he believed that he is getting orders straight from God. And you know, with God, you cannot negotiate. But most other people that I was talking to, the involvement like this one, very clear, having very clear implications for their personal interest, did have practical effect. Now, let us return to what you, how you prepare your mission. And there were some interesting things raised with Shahid and by Sarah. Now, Shahid, you are quite right. You need to, if you want to have leverage, you must have support from important actors. Who are important actors? You mentioned neighboring countries that are relevant, such as Pakistan. You need, it would be ideal if you would have support of the Security Council. But even if some Security Council members do not support your mission, if it is known that after your mission, you are going to report to the Security Council on your findings and advise Security Council how to proceed in this country, it incredibly increases your leverage. Now I'm moving to Sarah, and social and economic aspects and leverage can be important as well, although that was never in my portfolio to be able to promise them that they may have, if they behave, some support in improving their government, in functioning of social services, and so on. Sometimes to use the leverage, for example, of donor countries, of the World Bank, and so on, can be hugely, hugely important. But Sarah's intervention brings me to another important issue, and it is how should UN work when confronting a situation in a country that threats to be leading to atrocity crimes. Yeah. You probably have often heard mantra that the UN has to speak in one voice to avoid giving mixed messages. So do you think that we should all be disciplined, having same speaking notes, and that Jeff Feltman, who was at the time Undersecretary General for Political Affairs, myself, and the head of UNDP should be using same speaking notes when talking to a country?
I'd say no. What do you think, Saeed, Sarah, and others who are in the room? I know after that Vishal has a question, so we'll probably take it when at an opportune moment, and Sarah has another question. But Sarah, do you want to say something? I'm trying to unmute you.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, definitely having a central goal allows them to then join in on that goal when they understand it and they agree with it. And right, there's always that incentive for agreement. That's why the goal was created in the first place. And so I feel like having that established is so key. I mean, and that's the whole goal of the UN, right, is peace. And allowing them to understand the importance and benefits of peace, I feel like helps keep everyone in unity with one another and included. And I think their goal is inclusion and respect, and definitely that UN and foreign aid support. I think that having people scripted nearly is definitely dangerous, because it takes out the authenticity of the goal, the power of it. And I do believe that, you know, people in the UN and the different actors of it are, you know, brought together on that team because everyone has different strengths, but they have the same goal of peace. They have the same heart drive of peace. And I think allowing people to explore, you know, and have their own relationships with the Taliban with that central goal is much more effective, because it's much more honest, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyone wishing to join the discussion on this particular issue, or should I share with you my views?
Okay. I think
we were, yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, sir. I just want to voice my opinion on it. I think that having a central goal is very important. And the way the UN is structured, it has a lot of organs, branches, and each branch is based on a particular sub-ideology and particular ways of doing things. Let's talk about the UNDP. The major focus is on development. The UNICEF is major focus on children. So we can use different approach by these agencies to achieve the same peace that the UN is trying to foster. So being scripted, I think, is completely out of the line for the UN. And if you would do that, that means we're actually not going to achieve anything, because if a refusal to one aspect of being scripted is done, definitely it will apply to other ones. So with different branches, they have different ways of supporting, like UNICEF, education for the children, giving them sound educations and undiluted educations could help promote democratic dispensations, could help people aware of the rights. UNDP, that goes into development of schools as well, which UN Habitat is there to provide water and sanitations to help in settlement design that will allow people to more friendly community lives to pursue their goals. I think with this sub-sectors are trying to achieve the same central goal, I think it's much better using different intervention or approach, but having a central ideology. That's my take on it.
Thank you. We had during Secretary General Ban Ki-moon a very fierce debate over that issue. My office, Human Rights Office, including myself, we were criticized that quite often we go faster and stronger than rest of the UN, so that we are in a way departing from colleagues that are dealing with other parts of the United Nations. So we were criticized that because of us, UN is not speaking in one voice, that that's bad for the system. At the end of debate, it was clear, just as you three, when I combine what you said, that was also our outcome of the discussion, that we need to have a clear common goal, but we should also use comparative advantages of our UN branches or organization unit or agencies or however you call it. So using our mandates, which are different, we should be contributing to the same goal, meaning we do not have to speak in one voice, but we should speak in harmony. We must have a clear common goal. So when my colleagues from developmental side, political side, when they speak, they will emphasize different angles, different priorities. However, they will not be undermining me, and I will not be undermining them. And we have a common coach. We are part of the same team, and the coach is Secretary General. And we have to coordinate our activities. That is crucial, that I know what they will do tomorrow, and they know what will I do, that I don't catch them by surprise. You know, that is essential to be effective. Now, what do you think in atrocity crimes prevention diplomacy? Should a person involved in it, should the person be outspoken, or should the person be completely discreet? When you see that atrocities are being committed, crimes are being committed, do you speak up, or do you just discreetly talk to the key players who can prevent it from occurring?
I'd like to start with a question for you on how you address that. And it comes to like a number that, you know, there's a point, right, at which you can't continue to allow the deaths to happen. So you put your foot down and you say, okay, from this point on, like, you will be charged, you know, for every crime that you commit, or, you know, every murder that happens now that you've hit that point, like, or whatever the punishment is. What is that number, you know, for the secretary or the security of the UN? You know, like with the Rohingyans, you know, is it like 1 million? Is it 5 million? Is it 20?
Thank you for this question. And as you probably expect, there is not a one-fit-all answer. Just as when I'm asking you whether to speak up or to involve in discreet diplomacy, you need to involve in both. Because if they know that you will never speak up, they don't care, because you will never speak up and you have no leverage at all.
Yeah.
If they know that you will always speak up, and that immediately after tete-a-tete you will talk to BBC, CNN, Russia Today, Al Jazeera, then they'll never engage in serious discussion. So you need to balance the two, speaking up and discreet diplomacy.
Very game theoretical
the same
argument.
applies. Yeah. It's also, Sarah, you are raising another hugely important issues. And quite often there are discussions about peace and justice. Which of those should have advantage? And there are usually those diplomats who are saying, listen, you human rights people, you academicians, you are emphasizing justice, ending impunity. If I insist on that now in a situation where all sides were involved in crimes, we will just have continuation of criminal activity. The atrocities will continue. The leaders, political and military leaders, are cornered. Peace for them means accountability, so there will be no peace. So just move away and let us do our work. Then people from human rights and rule of law and people who are pursuing the justice issue are saying, listen, there are so many country situations, and you list them, when we were using such an approach, and your so-called peace was never peace. It was just a ceasefire because crimes were not addressed. We are having reoccurrence of crimes in a couple of years. We cannot continue like that. And again, I was involved in a discussion at a high-level retreat for UN leadership when we were discussing those issues. And I think that in his recent book, Ban Ki-moon does refer to that retreat, where I was arguing that for the sake of reaching peace, you may not immediately insist on full scope of prosecution of atrocity crimes committed, but you have to have clarity that at the end of process, there will be justice for victims. Because if you just think about today and not about tomorrow, it's avoiding difficulties which will reoccur and being much more serious in the future. So if you start by commitment of everyone that there will be a process of justice started, that first you start with establishing of fact, some commissions of inquiry. If you can do it with a firm commitment that at the end there will be prosecution of crimes, I think that's the most productive way to do it. Do you know how Colombia has addressed the issue of justice? They were negotiating, and the peace accord between the rebels and the government, which ended in reconciliation, was a very interesting example of compromise. They agreed that there would be reduced sentences and serving sentences not imprisoned but confined in certain little villages for people who are convicted. And that was sufficient for some rebel leaders to accept a peace accord. It was very difficult. Some victims were objecting to them, but at the end, it worked because there was, in the whole country, there was acknowledgement that crimes should be convicted, that perpetrators should be ashamed and should be punished, but you didn't insist in harshest punishments for everyone because that would prohibit peace. You had also something similar in South Africa. I do not know whether you are familiar with Truth and Reconciliation Commission absolutely. In South Africa. It enabled people who were involved during apartheid in crimes to have an opportunity to confront the commission, to reveal human rights violations and repent. And they were able that way to avoid punishment and to have reduced punishment. It's difficult. I'm always inclining towards accountability. That's in me. But sometimes we have to make compromises. But that compromise should never be that it's punto final and that there will be no justice for the sake of peace, because it's not true. If you do not address root causes and if you do not have satisfaction for victims, you are just creating a ceasefire, not a sustainable peace. At least that's my personal belief. So you were on your mission to Afghanistan. What are you going to do after your mission?
After introduction of making sure that they have a good postal system? Like, how would I What do you mean? I'd
No,
move on to the next.
I think the question is that, okay, let's say you
your
do your
opinion,
mission.
you talk to political and military leaders during you at the end of mission. What do you do? Do you talk to the press? Do you try to contact anyone to inform about your findings? Do you do it publicly or privately? What do you do?
Okay, for me, Sarah, go please.
Oh yeah,
go,
I lots of press. You know, the whole goal is making sure that people know that they have the resource available to them and to run to their nearest postal station, to get an address, to get signed up, to get connected, let them know that, you know, they are, the world is very excited to be able to communicate with them. And, you know, in partnership, I would definitely have like a political representative with me and letting them know that, you know, they're all about the communication. They're all about, you know, setting a good infrastructure for the new country. And just talking about, you know, the different ways that they can use it. Because a lot of it is like societal training. So getting them excited about it, getting them used to it so they know how to use it. And, you know, maybe doing like a community party or something so that it's a celebration and they understand that there's, this is a good thing. And postal workers, you know, in America are definitely everyone's favorite government employee. So I think starting off with that note, so they kind of celebrate the postal workers, get to know them in their local area, kind of make them the new hero of the town, I think is really fun and definitely would be my next move.
Yeah, for me, I would say it's at the end of my mission, I would try as much as possible to ensure that there's a commission, already established commission, do not end all the agreements. After speaking with both parties, there was a consensus, there was a resolution. So the committee or the commission that was established to do that will continue to follow up for the next couple of years so that the parties that were involved get used to what were resolved, what are the resolutions, and is it working, and what are the adjustments, or what are the new realities. I'm going to do that. I'm going to speak to the press as well that we have an agreement, such a way, because you said at the other time we need to ensure that we balance the districts and as well as the outspoken diplomacy. So the district is going to be the continuous activities of the commission over the years after the end of the mission. Why the outspoken is to communicate to the media, communicate to the people through the media by ensuring, by allowing people to understand that there's a resolution in place. Both parties agree to those resolutions, and the international community or whatever community involved are seriously in touch with those parties and will continue to follow up with them to see what are the emerging reality and the way cooperation is actually going. So I think that those are the two methodology. And also, we will try as much as possible to see that they have all the instruments that will enable them to implement those resolutions, because it's very important. Yeah.
I think if I were to add to this and taking my cue from what you've been talking about, Ambassador, I would probably talk to those people that, you know, if the government leaders in Afghanistan know that I have communicated to those people who could be government leaders of other governments, or it could be the press, or it could be anybody else. So knowing that I've talked to those people would make the Afghanistan government act in a more responsible and accountable manner. I'll take that judgment and I'll talk to those people.
Yes, I fully agree that it's important to have follow-up. The missions that you involve in are not mere exhibitionism. You want to change reality on the ground. So it's very important that there are some practical consequences. From my experience, it was extremely useful if leaders have made some commitments to make them public. And I would say that I was very happy to hear from His Excellency about his commitment to employment of women, for access to education, and so on. So I would speak positively, but hammer the commitments that I got from leadership. You are doing that for two main purposes. One is for local civil society, local media will pick it up, and that will be creating a pressure to hold such commitments and to be bound by them. But then also, it's very important that then there would be some conditionalities by European Union, by World Bank. You committed, and then there are some monitoring mechanisms established whether your commitment will really be exercised in practice. It also depends on the content of your report. I definitely always had excellent experiences of impact of my missions when I had opportunity to talk to the Security Council. And that can have different modalities. It can be, for example, it can be an informal session, which means it's closed session. It's Security Council members only, especially if you observed some dangerous trends and you want to encourage Security Council to take some steps, some serious actions to be taken. If you want to suggest Security Council to have some red lines, and if those red lines are crossed, that there should be a resolution under Chapter 7 passed. And again, that brings me to Sarah's issues of the limits. When do you push for the Security Council action? It's different. I can tell you that in certain country situation, I said to the Security Council during informals, listen, this country has a history of genocide. And if you wait for the numerical threshold of rapes, murders, tortures, and so on, it's a forest fire. You'll never be able to stop it. Have different red lines, not numerical, but qualitative red lines. If leaders in this country continue to use hate speech against the other ethnic groups, if you see a process that they are changing the ethnic structure of the police and of the army, those are signs of preparations of atrocity crimes and potential genocide. So you don't need certain number of dead bodies. If this goes on, if necessary, go for the Chapter 7 resolution, establish peacekeeping mission there, not because escalation of atrocity crimes that already happened, but because this spread is so serious that if you want to prevent potential genocide, we must act when those red lines occur. Or sometimes it's better that after your mission, you have a report to the Security Council at a public meeting when everybody is able to hear it or potentially to participate. So that should be different, but also I think it's important to stand ready for all relevant actors, for example, regional actors, to be in touch with them and share with them your findings. I centered my presentation on the United Nations, not because United Nations are most important in atrocity crimes prevention. My view is that most important actors are in each society. In each society, you have civil society actors, potentially religious leaders, elders, whoever, who can have huge role in atrocity crimes prevention. There is huge role of neighboring countries, of regional organizations, of donor countries. I was centering on the United Nations diplomacy because that's my personal experience and I was involved in it. So on all these other issues, some other time, I see that I have exceeded my time. And dear colleagues, I enjoyed being with you, and let us work together for better 21st century.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ambassador. I know that Vishal, one of our fellows, had a very quick question. So if you wouldn't mind just staying on for a minute and answering that. Vishal, do you want to quickly unmute yourself and ask your question, please? Go ahead, Vishal.
Good evening, Mr. Ambassador and all. Mr. Ambassador, there are two things. One is early warning systems. Early warning system for these genocides and all these acrobatic crimes. Don't you think these social media channels, right, today is a very big impactor and actor in this area? So, any mission have a something on the background to check social media channels to get the pulses of the nation, number one. And number two, I would like to start a mission in Afghanistan. Don't you think food, medicine, education, these are the primary needs any mission should propose to all the nationals, leaders, which are posing to head the nation now, to start with those missions, sir?
Thank you very much. Now let me address the first issue you are raising. Social media are of tremendous importance. Social media can have a very powerful positive as well as a very powerful negative role. The same applies to not only social media, but to other media. You know that in case of Rwanda, for the first time since Nuremberg, we had a sentence by international tribunal which addressed the use of radio in contributing to genocide. Previous to that, it was a Nuremberg case when there was a journal by Nazi Germany who was inciting genocide, the striker, which the editor of that journal has been convicted. But you are quite right that social media are extremely powerful too, and monitoring social media is hugely important to identify the pulse of the country, to identify, for example, the increase of hate speech in social media is a clear indicator of the danger. And I can tell you that some colleagues were involved in production of a software monitoring social media, which would be filtering out some dangers based on keywords, based on this, based on that, which could monitor objective quantitative monitoring of social media. Of course, it should be combined with also qualitative analysis, but is hugely important. But I can tell you something else about media and social media. We should not be only reactive, we should be proactive. We should use social media as well as other ways to influence in order to prevent escalations in certain countries. And I had an opportunity to discuss at one meeting with religious leaders their role in atrocity crimes prevention. And those were cross-religious group of very senior religious leaders. And my main point is analogy between responsibility of religious leaders with responsibility of political leaders and military leaders, saying to them, you are not only responsible for what you say, just as they are not responsible only to commands they give. You are also responsible when you see things are going wrong and you stay silent, or when some bad things are committed and you don't condemn them. It's not only what you say, but what you don't say that can contribute to atrocity crimes commitment. And the response was quite good. And I can tell you that in practice, for example, in Central African Republic, I was working closely with the Christian and Muslim religious leaders of the country. They were even willing to travel together to places where there was danger of religious confrontation between two groups, and they would appear together. They would condemn extremism of both sides and talk to them, explaining that both religions require for them to refrain from discrimination, abuses, or violence against other groups. Unfortunately, we had some lower level clerics who were inciting violence, but those two top religious officials, I think, have contributed a lot into atrocity crimes prevention and life-saving in Central African Republic.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for your answers and for being so open and candid with your discussions. It's refreshing to have people come to us and talk really about how things work on the ground and the nitty-gritties over there, as you have done. And thank you for being so generous with your time. I know that we were a little greedy over there, and we were able to bite more time from your schedule than was originally planned for. But thank you so much for this great discussion. I'm sure we are going to be thinking a lot about this in the future.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it, and I don't think it's a waste of my Saturday, but a very good investment. Bye.
Thank you so much. You have a nice weekend, Ambassador.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye.